Happy New Year, everyone. Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. I hope that the start of 2021 finds you all well. I am so excited because I am starting off the new year with one of my favorite things, and that is a book list. I love book lists. And today I finally get to share with you my top 20 reads of 2020. 2020 was quite an adventure, to say the least. One of the positives for me was that I read more this year than I have read in the past 2 years put together. I read over 150 books in 2020. Yesterday I did a video where I went through all 154 books, so you can check that out if you are interested and see if we read some of the same books. I will leave a link below in the comments. 154 books blows my mind, but with the pandemic it definitely allowed for time. Especially since I couldn't travel or do the things that I normally do, like go to concerts, to the theater, see my friends and family. So this year was truly a reading year for me, and I was able to take full advantage. I know that this is not everyone's experience. Many avid readers haven't been able to focus or concentrate. And when that happens, it can be very frustrating. I think that sometimes our brains just say, you know, there's way too much going on and I can't take this and I need a break. And as we all know, there was plenty happening last year, all year, with no breaks. So if this is your experience, please be patient, be kind, and be gentle with yourself. I have been there too, and it will come back. And maybe you can add some of these books to your TBR when you are ready. Not only did I read a lot this year, but I read some phenomenal books. I could probably do a top 50 or 60 list and gush about all of the great books. In fact, if you stick around until the end, I will be letting you know exactly how I will be doing that. That's why I am so excited to be doing this video. Normally, I would do a top 10 list, but this year, because it's a 2020 list and because I read so much, I thought I would share my top 20 reads of 2020. And if you've been following my channel, then you already know that I try to read as diversely as possible. And books that made it into my top 20 of 2020 are diverse in genre. There is fiction, nonfiction, literary fiction, historical fiction, thrillers, mysteries, biographies, memoirs, YA, humor, and even horror books that made the list. And there's also a variety of authors that made the list as well. So from favorite authors to debut authors and authors who were new to me this year, there are Afghan, American, Argentinian, Canadian, Chinese, Indian, Indigenous, Irish, Scottish, and Swedish authors on this list, as well as authors who identify with the LGBTQIA2S+ community. Normally, I would share my list, and I wouldn't put them in any particular order. So another thing that I am excited about is that this year I am actually going to do a countdown. So you will know my #1 book of 2020. And can I just say that that process was really hard to do, like actually physically painful, because they are all so incredible. We have a lot to get through, so here we go. Number 20 is a debut historical fiction novel that came out in 2020. The Henna Artist by Indian author Alka Joshi. Isn't this cover just stunning? I love it. This story takes place in the 1950s in India. The protagonist, Lakshmi, is a henna artist, trying to make an independent life for herself. When Lakshmi's 13-year-old sister, who she didn't even know existed, shows up, it turns her life upside down. And what I loved about this novel is that the story is really about India. The sights, the sounds, and the traditions, it transports you there. This is also a story about family, both blood family and chosen family. And it's a story about trying to make the right decisions and living with the consequences, because I'm sure you know, things are not always black and white. The writing is lyrical with crisp and vibrant images. At number 19 is a YA novel that I adored. This one goes back a way. It was first published in 1999, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by American author Chbosky. This is a coming-of-age story that takes place in the early 90s, so it had a lot of nostalgia for me. Charlie is a teenage boy trying to figure out where he fits in, with his friends, with his family, with girls, with school, and with himself. He is empathetic and compassionate, almost to a fault, but it also makes him endearing. The book is written in diary entries to the reader. This is a heartwarming story with well-developed characters and writing that flowed very smoothly. Up next at number 18 is a memoir published in 2019, From the Ashes by Jessie Thistle. Jessie is Métis and Cree, originally from Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, or PA, as my peeps would say. A shout out to all of my PA peeps. This book has received so much well-deserved attention. This memoir is written in vignettes, and Jessie's writing is honest and raw. It definitely deals with heavy topics: racism, addiction, homelessness, treatment of the First Nations people living in Canada, foster care, crime, abuse. It's intense, but the brilliance of this memoir is that it offers hope. It shows how a man can look inside himself to find out who he really is and do whatever it takes to become that person. At times I was holding my breath, and then a few paragraphs later I'd find myself kind of chuckling at Thistle's witty humor, and I definitely laughed out loud about his wall of soap. I am so grateful that Jessie was courageous enough to share his story. At number 17 is a fiction book by a Swedish author, Us Against You by Fredrik Backman. It was first published in 2017, and this is the second book in the Beartown series. I read the first book as well this year, and you might be wondering, like, why wouldn't I put the first book in the list? Well, here's the thing. Okay, so if this was the top 30 of 2020, I would have, but like I said, it was tough, and I had to harden my heart and make some tough decisions and remove some fantastic and amazing books from this year's list. And in this case, I loved both, but I enjoyed Us Against You just a little bit more because Backman does such a spectacular job in the first book to set everything up. He creates a culture of a town that when you get to the second book, he's already done all of that and he doesn't have to take the time to do it again. So it's like driving into a town you already know and waving to people on the street. Now, if I made that sound light and fluffy, I must assure you that it is not. I think it's important to read the books in order. So Beartown first, then Us Against You. And Backman has the third installment coming out this year in 2021. So Us Against You picks up where Beartown leaves off. It's the story about how a town picks up the pieces when its lifeblood, the hockey team, has crumbled and the town is divided. Backman's writing is top-notch. It's intelligent and it has so much depth. It's an intense book that plays with your emotions in the best way, and it deals with a number of social issues, which no other author does quite like Backman. Somehow, he is able to take on the politics of a small town, rape and its aftermath, sexual orientation, death and grief, and various complex relationships. The third book in this series is one of my most anticipated books of 2021. And if you pick up Beartown or Us Against You, please say hello to Benji for me because he's my favorite. At number 16 is a biography by American journalist Robert Kolker, Hidden Valley Road, Inside the Mind of an American Family. This is the story of the Galvin family, who settled in Colorado and had 10 boys and 2 girls, the oldest born in 1945 and the youngest in 1965. The size of the family is astonishing by today's family sizes, but what really makes this story fascinating and also heartbreaking is that 6 of the boys, one after the other, are diagnosed with schizophrenia. The perfect life that the Galvin family portrayed was really anything but perfect. There was violence, sexual abuse, and psychological breakdowns. Add to the mix that there were different perceptions of what schizophrenia was, and how it should be treated. And I thought that the book was very well researched, and I really liked how Kolker weaved together the family story and the scientific aspects of schizophrenia. Moving along at number 15 is a humor book by one of my favorite Canadian authors, who I can always count on to make me laugh out loud. Albatross by Terry Fallis certainly did that. In this story, Adam Coryell is a high school student. He's a likable, humble guy who is in love with Allie, and he dreams of being a writer. His phys ed teacher, Bobby, has read an article by a Swedish professor that claims that everyone is probably disposed to being good at least with one sport. So after several limb measurements, it turns out that Adam is exceptionally good at golf. He has the potential to become this rich and famous golf player without even practicing. But Adam doesn't like golf, and you don't have to like golf either to enjoy this book. It might seem that the novel is about golf, but it's really not. It's really about following your passion and your dreams, and that money doesn't always buy happiness. And Adam is conflicted as he tries to do the right thing. His relationship with Bobby is so heartwarming, and Bobby is definitely one of my new favorite characters. This is a charming story with Canadian humor and a classic Terry Fallis ending that will leave you feeling really good. At number 14 is a historical fiction novel, A Fine Balance by Indian author Rohinton Mistry. Now, don't let the 800 pages deter you. This book takes place in the 1970s in an unnamed city in India, and during the Indian emergency. The main characters are an uprooted student named Manik, Dina, who is a resourceful widow, and an uncle and nephew who are both tailors. All of them are just trying to survive, and through their stories and the stories of several secondary characters, we learn of the poverty, the caste system, and the corruption that existed. In a time when trusting others is very difficult, these four people learn to lean on each other, and unlikely friendships develop. We also learn of the will to survive and what people will do to overcome adversity. This is a heartbreaking story. It's powerful, and the writing is spectacular, so be prepared to have all of the emotions with this one. Coming in at number 13 is a beautiful non-fiction, and I would say spiritual book, One Drum, Stories and Ceremonies for a Planet by one of my favorite authors, Richard Wagamese. Wagamese was Ojibwe from here in Ontario, and One Drum was published after his death, and it is exceptional. The plan for this book was to take the 7 grandfather teachings, which are the foundational teachings of the Ojibwe tradition, and offer the teachings and ceremonies to all of us. The stories told in this book are beautiful and poignant. They have a mystical element to them. As I read, I felt like a little kid sitting cross-legged, staring up at an adult, soaking in every word they were saying, and when it ended, hoping they would tell just one more story. So not only are the stories and writing beautiful, but the book itself is gorgeous. I will show you some of the pictures inside. The photos are beautiful. Let's see if I can find you another one. So throughout the whole book, there are different pictures. The ceremonies described are sacred and personal, with the desire and ability to be communal. Wagamese tells stories of his own life and shares how ceremonies helped him to heal and keep him in unity with others and with creation. The only thing that I can say was a disappointment is that the book was never finished before Wagamese's death. So it only includes 3 of the teachings, humility, respect, and courage. Then I think maybe that's the gift that Wagamese has left us, a solid foundation to go out and learn about the remaining ones on our own. So this is a beautiful and timely book for our world. At number 12 is a contemporary fiction novel, Firefly Lane by American author Kristin Hanna. This is a coming-of-age story about two friends, Kate and Tully. Kate doesn't feel like she fits in at school, and her parents are always asking about her life, which they should. Tully is the new kid and the popular kid, and there's something mysterious and appealing about her. Kate and Tully become the best of friends. They dream of growing up together and working for the same company. But when they get to university, it's Tully who wants to make it big in the world, and Kate wants to get married and have children. So although their friendship is strong, their two worlds start to separate a little bit, and then a major betrayal, which my jaw did drop to the floor, threatens to end the friendship forever. This is a heart-wrenching story about friendship, love, marriage, and the choices and sacrifices that we make. At number 11 is a collection of 12 short stories. All of them are horror stories. The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Argentinian author Mariana Enrique. Originally published in Spanish in 2009, this collection was translated by Megan McDowell, and this book is being published on January the 12th, 2021, so just in a few days. These stories, you guys, okay, oh my goodness, they are horrifying, they're dark and morbid, and I loved it. I'm not gonna lie, they startled me, they made me feel a little queasy, and the suspense nearly killed me. Each time I started a new story, I couldn't wait to find out what was going to happen and how the story was going to take a turn to the unexpected, which happened every time. So these horror stories suck you in and they punch you in the gut with their shocking audacity. I'd be reading and then I'd have to, kind of do a double take, and I'd ask myself, did I just read that? Is that really what that says? So there are themes of jealousy, revenge, curses, fear, death, and mental illness. There's also drug use, a lot of sex, and a whole lot of weirdness. The writing is out of this world. If you like horror and you don't shy away from the grotesque, then I highly, highly recommend this short story collection. Okay, so this is where the pressure is on, the top 10. Here we go. At number 10 is the debut thriller mystery Midnight at the Braid Ideas Bookstore by American author Matthew Sullivan. I bought this on a whim and then read it in one sitting. First, it takes place in a bookstore. I mean, that's amazing. Lydia, the main character, works at the bookstore. She is kind and caring, especially toward the book frogs that come into the store. When her favorite book frog, Joey, dies by suicide, he leaves behind surprising clues that Lydia feels compelled to follow. So in the story, we also learn of Lydia's traumatic past and who Joey was. I was surprised by the ending, and there were several connections I wasn't expecting. None of my theories were correct, and I do love that. There are many intense scenes. The story is clever and imaginative, and the writing is so good, especially for a debut novel. So I really look forward to reading more from this author. Next at number 9 is a gem of a mystery by a new author to me, The Red Chesterfield by Wayne Arthurson, who is Cree and French Canadian. In this story, the main character is a bylaw officer. He comes across a red Chesterfield couch for my US peeps that has been in a ditch. His curiosity gets the best of him, and he finds a shoe in the back of the Chesterfield. And inside the shoe is a severed foot. So now he finds himself in the middle of a murder investigation. The Red Chesterfield is probably the most unique, quirky, funny, and odd book I have ever read. I thought this book was brilliant. I loved the story, the characters, and the writing. It has so many layers and it's so clever. Plus it's only 120 pages, so it's not a huge commitment. Coming in at number 8 is another historical fiction debut novel, Little Indians by Michelle Good. Michelle Good is a Cree woman originally from Saskatchewan, and this is about a residential school in British Columbia. It follows the lives of 5 of the students, Lucy, Maisie, Clara, Howie, and Kenny, my favorite. My heart broke for each of them. Each character gives us insight into residential schools and into the repercussions and the suffering that residential schools, their school survivors have experienced. I absolutely loved how this story was told, and the writing was fantastic. What I like most about this book was that the emphasis is not on their time at the school, and it's not necessarily about the suffering that they endured. The focus is more on the strength and how they fought to survive. When they leave the school, either because they have aged out or because they have run away, they don't have family anymore, and they don't have a place to go. They don't know how to care for themselves in the real world, and they end up in Vancouver, which is like this big city which is foreign to them. So what they carry with them are these deep physical, emotional, psychological, and traumatic wounds. And the author tells us enough of what happened at the school without going into great detail. And I think in this case, that was more powerful. This story is about strength, survival, grief, loss, healing, and hope, and the comfort of having a chosen family who know you and love you. At number 7 is another historical fiction novel, 1,000 Splendid Suns by Afghan author Khaled Hosseini. I was captivated by this story from the first page. This story takes place in Afghanistan, and it is about two women, Miriam and Layla. Miriam lives with her mother, away from society. Miriam's life revolves around their tiny little home. She does not go to school, and she lives for Thursdays, because Thursdays are when her father comes to visit. Her father lives a very different life from Miriam and her mother. He shares stories with Miriam about his travels and the big city, and Miriam's life changes drastically one day. She has to move away from everything and everyone that she has known in order to marry an older man named Rashid. Eventually, Rashid and Miriam try to have a baby, but they are unsuccessful. Layla, much younger than Miriam, has had a very different life than Miriam. She was born and raised in Kabul to two loving parents. She has dreams of marrying her sweetheart, but when tragedy strikes, she is taken in by Rashid and Miriam. Both women have lost pretty much everything, and they need each other in order to survive. These remarkable women's stories are told with the backdrop of Afghanistan's politics and war. This is a story about relationships between mothers and daughters, motherhood, endurance, survival, love, dreams of oppressed women, and the human spirit. The writing is spectacular, the character development is strong, and the story is an emotional roller coaster ride. Speaking of roller coaster rides, at number 6 is a contemporary fiction debut novel, My Dark Vanessa by American author Kate Elizabeth Russell. So how do I talk about this book? This book is intense. The story itself is a dark one. It's a modern day Lolita, and that classic novel definitely inspired this story. In the year 2000, Vanessa Y is only 15 years old. She's an intelligent student at a private school. She's naive and has her whole future in front of her. She also has a crush on her English teacher. She daydreams about having a relationship with him. Jacob Strain is her 42-year-old English teacher. They begin an affair that lasts quite some time. And then in 2017, Vanessa is in her 30s, and Strain he's been accused of sexual abuse by a former student. And that former student tries to get Vanessa to talk about what happened with her, but Vanessa doesn't see it as abuse. She sees what she had with Strain as a love story. And the brilliance of this book is in how the story is told. It's told from Vanessa's perspective. We hear her thoughts and know her emotions, and I think if it was told in any other way, it wouldn't have been nearly as powerful and compelling. Strain's manipulation and grooming is subtle and very twisted. This topic can be explosive, and the author does not shy away from that. This book made me angry, it made me cringe, it made my heart hurt, it made me feel emotions I didn't even know that I had. This is a book that deals with a controversial topic in a way that no other book I've read has. And I think that it's an important novel because it has the ability to influence conversations and the way that we think about predators of young children. Oh, this next one. Oh, you guys. Okay. At number 5 is the beautiful fiction novel Autumn by Scottish author Ali Smith. If you could take the perfect autumn day and put it into a book, this would be it. This is the first of Ali Smith's seasonal quartet. It's so fantastic. Autumn is one of the loveliest books that I've read all year. This is a beautiful story of a friendship between a young girl, Elizabeth, and her neighbor, Daniel Gluck. Elizabeth's mother doesn't really seem to understand Elizabeth, but with Daniel, Elizabeth discovers the importance of imagination. She acquires a love of words, language, books, art, music, and politics. The first thing Daniel says to her every time he sees her is, "What are you reading?" So I love Daniel. The writing is exquisite. There is poetic, comforting prose, and I just adored everything about this book. It has a perfect autumn feel, and I can't wait to read Winter, which is the next novel in the quartet. Up next at number 4 is a historical novel by an Irish-Canadian author, The Pull of the Stars by Emma Donoghue. This story takes place during the Spanish flu in Dublin, and okay, even though it takes place during a pandemic, it's about so much more than that. Julia Power is a nurse on a maternity ward that was literally a storage closet. The hospital is so understaffed that Nurse Power is attending to 3 expectant mothers all alone. The novel takes place only over, I think, 3 or 4 days. And what I love about this book the most is that each character had a purpose and something to tell the reader about the times. So whether it was the political climate, the role of the Catholic Church, the suffering that people endured, the aftermath of war, the divisions between class and genders, and even how pregnant women, or really any woman for that matter, were treated. This is a touching, timely, and beautiful story. At number 3 is another debut fiction novel. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Scottish author Gail Honeyman. I love Eleanor Oliphant. She's one of my favorite characters from this year. Eleanor is introverted, quirky, and probably on the autism spectrum. She loves margarita pizza, and she treats herself to vodka once a week. So by the end of chapter 3, she had endeared herself to me so much. For a debut novel, I am impressed at how much emotion and character development Gail Honeyman was able to create. Eleanor is such an interesting character. Her social ineptness can be cringeworthy, and her internal dialogue is sometimes good for a giggle. But I actually thought this book was sad and a little dark. To get to know Eleanor is to get to know all about Eleanor and all of her exterior and interior scars. And there was some heavy topics covered in this book, and it was done in such a beautiful way. Eleanor is alone in the world, and she has no friends. Mummy calls her every Wednesday night to basically treat her like crap, and she has a mad crush over a musician who doesn't even know that she exists. This book is about trauma, mental illness, loneliness, but it's really about friendship and how far human kindness can go to make a difference. Coming in at number 2 is a historical fiction novel by a Chinese-American author, The Island of Sea Women by Lisa C. I absolutely loved this novel that takes place on Jeju Island in South Korea. It begins in the late 1930s, and the story follows the friendship of Mija and Young-suk. They quickly form a very strong bond, even though they have very different backgrounds. Young-suk is living with her aunt and uncle on the island, and they don't treat her very well. So she finds solace with Mija and the Henna women. The Henna are women on the island who are deep sea divers. Their work is very dangerous, but they are highly respected, and their work is important. The husbands of the Henna women take care of the household and the children. The backdrop to the story is World War II, Japanese colonialism, the Korean War, and Hiroshima. Some scenes are very difficult to read, but they are so important, both to know the history and because of what happens to Mija and Young Suk's friendship. So as they grow up and they get married and they have their own children, this book is so beautifully written. The story is both endearing and heartbreaking. I loved learning about the Henna culture and learning really about a place that I didn't know anything about. And finally, at number 1 is the unparalleled historical fiction novel, The Book of Longings, by the courageous and talented American author Sue Monk Kidd. The concept of the book is interesting. What if Jesus had a wife? Who would she be? This is a reimagining of Jesus' life, a life which we know very little about from the age of 12 to the beginning of his ministry. In this reimagining, Jesus is married to Anna, but the story isn't about Jesus. It's really the story of Anna, and I loved this concept. I loved the story. I loved the writing. The prose are beautiful and rhythmic. Sue Monk Kidd uses well-known gospel stories to create and flesh out Anna's story. The focus is Anna, and the book is told from Anna's perspective. And I think that that's what makes this book brilliant. Anna is an intelligent, bold, and rebellious teenager when we first meet her. She lives in a society where women are left behind, they are silenced, and they have rules about what they can and cannot do. And Anna pushes at the edges of those rules, and she wants to be a scribe. She does not want to be betrothed to this older man that her father has arranged for her to marry. Strong women and female relationships is a given in all of Sue Monk Kidd's novels, so it wasn't a surprise that Anna is a strong woman, and she's surrounded by other strong women in this novel. One of my favorites is her aunt Yaltha. She's another well-developed character who helps Anna navigate the world as a woman who has ambitions and dreams that, are not really accepted in their society. You do not have to be religious or Christian to read and enjoy this book. The story can stand on its own. If you do know the gospel stories, then you might be surprised that you actually already know Anna and you know Anna's brother. I cannot say enough about how much I loved the way Sue Monk Kidd wove Anna's life and Jesus' life together while still being very respectful of scriptures. The Book of Longings is to the Gospels what The Red Tent by Anita Diamond is to the Torah. Both books give women a voice where there is barely a whisper. And Sue Monk Kidd gives Anna a voice that allows women to imagine themselves as part of a story in a way that they couldn't before. And this book will be staying with me for quite some time. That's a wrap on my top 20 reads of 2020. And if you're thinking, wow, that's great, Jolene, but I was hoping you would have more YA or thrillers or nonfiction on the list. Okay, not to worry, I gotcha. It's all good. Next week, as a bonus video, I am going to share my top 5 books in 10 genres that I read in 2020. So I'm not too great at math, but I do know that that's 50 books. So that will include some of the genres that might not have made a lot onto this list, like poetry and classics, to some genres that didn't have as many books, like horror and short stories. So hopefully your favorite genre or category will be part of that. There will obviously be some overlap, but at the very least, there will be 30 books that were not mentioned here. So please check that out next week. Please let me know in the comments below if you have read any of these, if any of these made your top 10 of 2020. Please share your thoughts, and Let me know what your favorites of 2020 have been. I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Happy New Year to you and to all of those that you love. And don't forget to make every day in 2021 an adventure.